Kate tossed and turned in bed all night, trying to find a comfortable position to sleep. Carrying triplets is no easy task, especially as her due date was approaching. Her husband Simon was sound asleep beside her, while Kate desperately battled insomnia. The 3 babies inside her belly seemed determined to keep her awake, behaving as though they had no intention of letting her sleep. "Why won't you just settle down in there? Will I always have to adjust for your own comfort from now on?" Kate thought to herself. After a few more futile attempts to find a comfortable sleeping position, Kate got up and headed to the kitchen to make some tea. It was now clear to her that she wouldn't be able to fall asleep, and the best she could hope for was to have a nap in an armchair. Simon, on the other hand, seemed completely unperturbed. It was Simon who had insisted on having an heir for the family. Well, now he's going to have 3 of them, Kate thought. The impending childbirth filled Kate with fear. She was especially concerned about the possibility of postpartum complications. Perhaps every woman who had the chance to become a mother faced such fears at some point. There's no need to describe Kate's shock when she learned that she was carrying multiples. Having left the doctor's office after her ultrasound, she hugged her husband and whispered, "Darling, can you imagine? We're having triplets. 3 wonderful boys." "What do you mean, triplets? Why? I'm not ready for this. We can't afford so many kids." Simon got nervous. Kate smiled. "Oh, come on. It's nature, not a business order. It's not up to us to decide." Simon didn't like that response. The thing was that he loved himself and his work way too much. And now he was afraid to even think about what kind of future awaited him. That's not going to work. It doesn't sound fun anymore. What if we run out of money? Or what if I get laid off? No, I didn't sign up for this, Simon muttered all the way home. Of course, Kate understood her husband's concerns, but she couldn't change the situation. It was proof that some things in life couldn't be planned. Ever since then, Simon seemed to have turned into a completely different man. Not a day went by without him vocalizing his dissatisfaction with Kate. The way Simon saw it, he was the provider and breadwinner of the family. Perhaps his problem was his overreactive imagination that instantly painted a picture of a bleak future with a horde of hungry and perpetually noisy kiddos. Simon always considered himself a far-sighted and cautious man, and thus he was very reluctant to shoulder such an enormous burden. Meanwhile, he showed little concern for Kate, who was going through a very tough time. Her severe morning sickness, combined with constant discomfort and weakness, subjected her to some of the most unpleasant moments in her life. Meanwhile, Simon viewed his wife's suffering with a touch of irony, bordering on open contempt. Attempting to save every cent, Simon placed various restrictions on his pregnant wife, as if she could deplete the family's financial reserves. Kate endured all the inconveniences with resilience, trying to prepare herself that childbirth wouldn't be too easy. Some doctors even openly discussed the possibility of a C-section. But Kate continued to hope that it wouldn't come to that. Meanwhile, Simon's behavior became increasingly provocative. He even took issue with Kate's noticeably rounded figure. And that was despite the fact that he knew she was carrying triplets. "You don't look good, Kate. What's going to happen to you after you give birth? Will you get even bigger?" Simon said with a displeased look. "Honey, these are just temporary inconveniences. It will all pass. My body will return to normal," Kate responded. But persuading Simon was almost impossible. And that was despite the fact that Kate vividly remembered that it was Simon who wanted them to have a baby. He had repeatedly spoken about how much he wanted to have an heir, pushing Kate to make that decision. Kate, on the other hand, had always planned on getting her college degree first and only then getting married. But as soon as she got pregnant, the situation changed dramatically. Now, Simon no longer cared about the taunts of his colleagues, who joked about him not being able to have kiddos. Previously, insinuations about his infertility drove him to anger, but now he felt like a true hero. Of course, this circumstance couldn't but sadden Kate, who needed her husband's support now more than ever. Unfortunately, while she was expecting triplets, she didn't know one crucial thing. Simon had recently started living a double life, spending more and more of his time in the company of his lover, Diana. The cunning beauty immediately set her sights on the promising businessman and intended to marry him. Cuddling in Diana's arms, Simon often heard flattering speeches, cunningly interwoven with personal proposals. "Darling, how much longer are you going to live with that cow of a woman?" She will keep you tied down with her 3 kids forever. You get that, right? Simon frowned and then asked, "Well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to change the situation? What is there to think about? Get a divorce, and that's it. Let this simpleton deal with her kids on her own," Diana said, smiling mysteriously. Simon thought for a moment and then gave an incoherent response, as he usually did in such cases. In reality, he was terrified of getting divorced. That was because he would have to give part of his assets to Kate in such a case. And that was something he could never let happen, mainly because of his inherent greed. It just so happened that Diana wasn't the only person who knew about his family problems. Connor Donahue, the director of the firm Simon worked at, was always aware of the man's infidelity. Connor learned about it accidentally when he saw Simon in the company of a woman that wasn't his wife. The couple was smiling and headed towards the nearest cafe. "Definitely isn't his wife. I remember Kate well. She came to our firm's Christmas party," Connor said thoughtfully, watching the couple. At that moment, he felt very uncomfortable having involuntarily become a witness to someone else's relationship. Truth be told, he didn't have any personal connections to Simon or his wife. But did Kate deserve such treatment? Of course she didn't. Connor remembered that brief encounter in the office when he had a chance to exchange a few words with Kate. She seemed like a very intelligent and educated woman. Did she deserve to be treated this way? She definitely didn't. On the other hand, Connor didn't want to interfere in another family's matters and drive a wedge between the spouses. If they continued to live like this, they had to be fine with how things were, so why look for problems where there aren't any? And while Connor was contemplating whether he should tell Kate about her husband's infidelity, something happened that shocked the man to the very core. It all started with the fact that Kate arrived at the hospital having contractions. As fate would have it, Simon wasn't at home at the time, so she had to take a cab. Kate tried to reach her husband on the phone with tears in her eyes, but she couldn't get through. Then she sent him a frantic text asking him to come to the hospital as soon as possible. And then came the most interesting part. Writhing in pain, Kate couldn't focus on her phone and accidentally sent the text to the wrong person. As fate would have it, it was Connor who got the text, as his phone number was saved in Kate's contacts. Often when her husband would stay late at work, Kate would call Connor to ask about it. Connor was her husband's boss after all. She needed to maintain a good relationship with him. Meanwhile, as Kate was at the hospital, Simon was enjoying himself with his lover, Diana, and didn't even think that his wife might need his help. Oh God, where is he? Why isn't he calling me back or picking up the phone? Kate wondered, drenched in sweat. Having received a strange text message from the wife of one of his employees, Connor was a bit confused. He understood that the woman could have simply made a mistake and sent the text to the wrong person. But the words, "Come to the hospital, I'm in labor," kept echoing in his mind. What if I actually went there? Even if it turns out to be a mistake, I can apologize politely and leave. I would be worse if Kate genuinely needed help and I didn't provide it, Connor thought with concern. Having left the office, he gave instructions to his assistant and rushed to the hospital. When he arrived there, he got a bit agitated. The nurse on call congratulated him on becoming a father of triplets, which made the man blush. "Thank you, of course, but I'm not the father. I'm just a friend of the family, sort of." "Where is the father then? He has 3 beautiful babies and he's nowhere to be found," the nurse said disapprovingly. Connor shrugged uncertainly, indicating that he didn't know the answer. "Well, let me take you to see Kate then. I'm sure she'll be happy to have a visitor," the nurse offered. Connor smiled awkwardly, but agreed. Soon he stood next to the bed with the exhausted mother. Kate's eyes gleamed with happiness, and a blissful smile adorned on her face. Having noticed Connor, she immediately asked, "What are you doing here? Did something happen to Simon? Come on, tell me. Don't be silent." Connor breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Nothing happened as far as I know. Your husband will show up eventually. Just make sure to take care of yourself, and I'm going to track him down." When Connor saw the 3 babies lying in a crib, tears welled up in his eyes. 5 years ago, his beloved wife Margaret died in a car accident. They had dreamed of having children back then, but it wasn't meant to be. And now Simon was willingly giving up all of that for his lover. "Well, let's see what you say when I find you," Connor muttered. However, he couldn't fulfill his promise because Simon didn't show up at work that day. Simon didn't show up the next day either, passing the message that he was sick to one of the other employees. Connor shrugged and headed back to the hospital to visit Kate. Unfortunately, neither he nor the young mother knew the most crucial detail. Simon wasn't actually sick. In reality, he was busy finalizing his divorce, and without his wife's presence, too. Diana helped him with that, as apparently she had some connections in the court. Kate was unaware of all of this, so she devoted all of her energy to taking care of her babies. Over the next week, Connor came to the hospital every day to check on the young mother. Unbeknownst to herself, Kate began to feel great respect for this caring man, who had taken on the responsibilities her husband had abandoned at the most crucial moment. 2 weeks passed. During this time, Simon not only failed to visit Kate once, but didn't even bother to call her. Instead, he succeeded in another endeavor. He got the divorce retroactively. Simon's plan was executed perfectly. By the time Kate was discharged from the hospital, she was no longer Simon's wife. The distressed new mother only found out about all of this when she returned home with the children and discovered a note left by Simon on the table. In it, Simon informed her of his intention to marry someone else and that Kate shouldn't count on his support anymore. Connor, who stood nearby, smiled. Deep down, he had already made his decision when he first saw Kate's babies. Looking into Kate's confused eyes, he said, "Don't worry, please. I'll help. As for Simon, he won't work at my company anymore." A spark of gratitude lit up in Kate's eyes. Thus, Connor became much closer to her than her husband, who had betrayed her at the hardest moment of her life. 6 months had passed. Simon realized the mistake he made when he found himself penniless. Looking for a job, he went from firm to firm, but no one wanted to hire him. Diana didn't stay with him for long and left him less than half a year after they moved in together. Meanwhile, Connor and Kate were happy together and were already planning their wedding. Moreover, the groom saw Kate's children as his own and treated them as if they were his own blood. Watching Connor, Kate sincerely wondered how she hadn't seen such a kind and caring person in him before, a man who would soon become her husband.